Welcome, folks. This is the Red Hook Town Board meeting of October 24th, 2018. Would you be kind enough to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Steve, for the folks at home, we have the agenda for this evening. And I think in the interest of having some folks here related to agenda item number 3, it's likely we will move that up to be the first one this evening. All set?
All set.
Very good. Okay. We have a couple of announcements. The first we would like to tell you about is we have set a public hearing on the 2019 preliminary budget. That is November 8th, a Thursday at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall. The budget is, I believe, already on the town's website for your viewing. That's the first announcement. Would also like to let you know that the speed limit signs, the new speed limit signs, are up on River Road between the bridge approach all the way up until the Bard campus. The speed limit is now 35 miles an hour. We want to thank DOT and of course Dutchess County who honored our request to lower the speed limits there. In addition to Route 9G from Kelly Road all the way up past Tivoli to the county border. So we'd like to let you know about those changes and of course we would encourage you to adhere to the speed limits. Okay. A couple of other announcements. The Red Hook Community Center, of which we have some programs, is having their annual gala coming up Saturday after this one. That's November 3rd from 6 to 10 p.m. right here at the Community Center on Fisk Street, if you're interested in that. October is Weatherization Month. And there are some programs that can help you become more comfortable in your own home. The Town of Red Hook Senior Services Committee has an event occurring also at the Community Center, October 30th at 4 o'clock. And you can find out about the state's weatherization programs. And many of those programs have subsidies or complete payment for upgrades to your property. All right, I think that is all I have for announcements. Does anybody else have any announcements tonight? Okay, if not, let's open up public comment period. Who would like to go first?
I'd like to go first.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the board, and thank you for all the work.
The slides.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on one second. That's okay. You can go ahead and talk.
You can introduce yourself and see.
And thank you for all the work that you're doing to improve our local parks. My name is Pamela Governale, and I'm a resident of Red Hook. And I'm here today with Ben Hohen and Wynn Faber to present findings of a supplemental needs survey for Red Hook Park West that several residents designed in response to the survey that was conducted by the town, and Tie and Bond, which focused on organized sports and was missing key questions that would address the broader needs of a large portion of the community. We have a few slides which show the highlights of the results and also have hard copies, which you all have in your hands now, and we're happy to email you copies as well. And the research goal for the supplemental needs survey was to acquire information from the broader community on desired uses for Red Hook Park West and to determine the level of support for the current plans. The data for our supplemental needs survey reinforces our opinion that the town survey excluded broader needs of the community, and our survey offers what we believe to be a more accurate picture of the diversity of needs and interests of local residents. And the survey was created in SurveyMonkey, and I would also just like to thank Brian Fuhr, who contributed a great deal to the creation of that. The survey was live for 7 days, and we conducted outreach via various outlets and networks, encouraging participation from a random sample of local residents, which resulted in 141 completed surveys. One of our first questions, as you can see, we asked participants where they live. And 60%, so of those respondents that shared their zip code with us, which was roughly 70%, the overwhelming majority were either from Red Hook, which was 60%, as you can see, or Tivoli, which was 23%, with the remaining from either Rhinebeck or areas beyond. And this indicates that the survey is highly representative of both residents of Red Hook and likely users of the area under consideration. Next slide, please. We asked folks how familiar they are with the current plans, and as you can see, 8% were extremely familiar, 22% were somewhat familiar, very familiar, 44% were somewhat familiar, 13% were not so familiar, and 14% were not at all familiar. And the folks who responded categorized themselves, and that's basically what I've got. So I'm going to turn it over to Win.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you, members of the board, for this opportunity. My name is Win Faber. I'm also a resident of Red Hook. So we offered respondents a link to a mock-up of the current plan, as has been shared widely throughout these meetings, and also encouraged them to visit the town site to find out more. Then we asked if they supported the plan. So as you can see from this slide, among all respondents, 134, 76% were not in support of the current plan. But of course, as you break the respondents into different cohorts, you will see different levels of support, as we will show in the next few slides. So do you support the current plan? This first slide revisits the distribution of respondents' locations, including the group that did not provide us with a zip code. We see the most important group, those that actually live in Red Hook, are significantly less supportive of the current plan than the other groups. So we can see Red Hook, it's 85%. Tivoli at 76% do not support. Rhinebeck residents were at 63, other 75, and unknown 67% of those did not support the current plan. In short, the current plan does not, in the opinion of the two most likely sets of users, meet their needs. Next slide, please. So how familiar are you with the current plans for the Red Hook Park West? Next, we look at the distribution of support among differences in familiarity with the plan. Again, we see some significant differences. Those either extremely familiar or very familiar with the plan are highly unsupportive of it. Those somewhat familiar and not so familiar retain that same 75% to 25% not supportive to supportive split as we see across all respondents. And finally, those that are not at all familiar, still on average, after learning of the plan, do not support it. This seems like convincing evidence to us that regardless of your knowledge of the plan, which importantly includes those just finding out about it from our survey, one is hard-pressed to find supporters. And for the remaining slides, I introduce to Ben Hohen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak. So this one is a little bit more complicated, this particular slide. What we did is this is a distillation of two separate questions in the survey. One of those questions was your frequency of park use, and the other question was what is the predominant park use that you have. And importantly, this is a set of respondents asking about park use outside of Red Hook. And we wanted to be sure to do that so that we did not bias the results by any real or perceived shortcomings of the current Red Hook Park offerings. So we're asking people sort of, forget about Red Hook, what do you do outside of that when you're looking for things to do in parks? This figure gives greater weight to respondents who are most frequent users. For example, if they used any parks once a day, they were given significantly more weight than those that use parks less than once a month. So the weighting is shown on the slide in very small print, and we can quibble over whether that's the right weighting, but clearly it gives weight to the more frequent users than less frequent users. We can see based on this frequency of all types of use, except group sports, the current plan is overwhelmingly unsupported, and also entertainment. Even though for group sports, which will not be served by, maybe not be served by a kid's baseball diamond, the support is only 2/3 to 1/3. Those are the most likely supporters of this plan, and we still see 37% do not support it. Once again, we do not see compelling evidence based on this particular slide based on the uses of regional parks to develop the area west of the current park as proposed in the current plan. So we're going to go to the next slide now. Okay, so this next one opens up a really interesting aspect of the survey. We asked folks, what else would you like to see in the plan? And the handout that you were given that was separate from the slides, this handout here, is multiple pages of responses. There are 104 or so responses of this question, so there's tons of information here. We've broken the handout into those that are supportive of the plan, which are shown on the first page, and then the remaining pages of those that are not supportive of the plan, what would they like to see in the plan. And a few of the, just a few of the open-ended responses are shown there on the screen. But I want to, so 75% of the respondents gave an open-ended response, and the suggestions are far-reaching, from an ice rink that is mentioned by 3 individuals. Robert, you'll be glad to know that the ice rink is still, even from the 1994 assessment, still in need, to climbing walls, to open-air band shell. And in terms of the type of environment, which was a sort of a separate set of responses people gave, one was uses, one was environment. There was a loud and clear cry, I would say, looking over them myself, among many respondents, to keep the area as natural as it can be, and recognizing, though, importantly, that we're not talking about preserving a historically natural resource, but nonetheless an important one that's natural for Red Hook. So we do not have time to parse all these data, but I do encourage you to kind of flip through there. There's a wealth of information about possible uses desired by the community. And then the last slide here. So finally, I'm going to dig just a bit further into those open-ended responses. Of course, we need to remind everybody that the predominant need that the current plan serves is that of those of special needs. And of course, no one in this room would argue that those individuals should not be provided access to park places that are well suited for them. But in looking through all of the 100 or so responses we received for the proposed plan and how it could be changed, there were only a few percent that mentioned kids or anyone with special needs, and roughly half were for changing those uses of the rec park east, not west. A full 95% made no mention of this important use. So to the degree that the proposed plan is expected to meet a strong desire of the community to meet those with special needs, we do not find support in it in that question. This would argue that yes, there is a need, but maybe spending the funds that we had talked about, maybe more than $1 million, to serve that portion of the population might be lopsided, at least based on these responses. And that's it for my comments.
Okay.
Oh, wait, one more, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for listening. I'm Michelle Platt, and I just wanted to say in conclusion, these results are statistically significant. We believe there is a mismatch between what the community wants from Red Hook Park West and what the current plans detail. We need more inclusive vision for the park and ask that the town board consider these findings when making decisions and planning for the park and for our community. And I'd like just to say, from a personal standpoint, I'm a homeowner in Upper Red Hook. I have a very, very small piece of land. I have 3 boys. When we want to take a walk, when we want to go out with the dogs, when we want to do anything, we rely on public property, or Norman Gregg's farm, or who will ever have us. And we use this land more than I can tell you, and it is a treasure for our family, and I can only imagine how much it could serve the rest of the community as well if they knew about it and if we enhanced it even just a little bit. It's really a special, I know it doesn't look like the most, you're driving by and it's not the most stunning piece of land, but it really, with the mountains in the back, and it's a lovely place to walk and be, it truly is, and maintaining the nature and living in Red Hook for me is it's such an incredible gift to be here, and I feel so grateful to be here, and I just hate to see a suburban sprawl take over in developing green space. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, would anybody else like to make some public comment? Yep. Brian?
Hi, I'm new here. My name is Brian Fuhr. I live at 83 Sism Road. I played a role in developing the survey results that you were just presented this evening. I'll tell you, I actually hesitated to come speak today, partially because I'm not sure the board is listening. I also worry that the board will respond to the survey results in a negative manner, and I don't think that reflects well on the dialogue in town. So I want to use my time to explain my skepticism and to suggest what the board can do to prove me wrong. I learned about issues related to the rec park late this summer when, in a conversation, I was told that the public survey was narrow and biased. So I took a look, and professionally I'm in marketing. And what I saw was that there was a lack of attention to some elements of community in the survey, and that I thought it was relevant for us to gain additional data and understanding about what the needs of the community are, in a couple of simple questions. It's amazing to receive 140 responses to a public survey online. That's 6% of Red Hook's 2,400 families, which shows interest and is very scalable. So you should feel confident in the results that was presented to you. After completing the survey, we asked for time at an upcoming board meeting, something like this, and there were a couple of date conflicts. While exchanging messages, though, the story turned a little bit. We learned that several of our email addresses had been blacklisted by the firm conducting the survey on behalf of the town. They were blocked. We're not sure why. Our next request came after our names had been cleared. The clerk printed out the request and put it in board member mailboxes. We don't know what happened after that. What we were told when we followed up was that there had not been a discussion of the request. We might be better off using other social media channels to place pressure, and that discussion about this particular parcel of land might be hopeless. Those are indirect, but those are verbatims. When we finally did get a message back, it was not sent to everyone on the original email. It excluded people who were relevant and participated in the conversation. The implication is that public dialogue isn't always welcome, let alone time on a public agenda. Point blank, it just shouldn't be that hard to get into a meeting. The 3 examples I shared with you add up to a suggestion that we're trying to suppress conversation about our land knowingly or unknowingly. They indicate that someone's not listening, and it kind of boggles my mind. I would think we would want this kind of civic engagement, especially when a group, page turn, of concerned citizens volunteer their time and their money to research how community money should be spent. We're all in this together, but it doesn't seem like we're all playing on the same team. So now that I've shared with you some of my skeptical thoughts, let me close by commenting on one thing we can do and one thing the board can do to prove us wrong. Make a choice. Choose to restrict public commentary and discussion about town business. Actually, it's in your code. You can do so. You have the right to throw us all out of here. You'll signal what we can expect going forward, and we'll know not to bother. That's fine. We'll elect someone else next year. Or you can choose to partner with the public that you serve. Ask us what we need, let us know you're listening, and show us you're working with us. Signal that you're committed and that you're accountable to your community and your taxpayers. And we'll also remember that on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Would anybody else like to make some public comments?
All right, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Brian Kent. I come here this evening to represent the Red Hook Little League Baseball Division. As you may or may not know, I am the Little League Vice President. I run the baseball and the softball here at the rec park. All this is great. I'm not putting anybody's thoughts down. I'm not putting anything back. I understand exactly where everybody's coming from, but the facts come to this. I have a very small window of time that I can schedule games on these fields that we have at the rec park. I have to turn teams away. We have a travel team, the Dutchess Wolverines. I'm sure you guys may or may not have heard of them. We have to just send them other places. We have more children now than we have fields. We just don't have enough fields. There's just nothing we can do. You can say it's because the school's on the fields and I have to schedule around them. There's a lot of things everybody can say. I can just tell you this, from my end, from the numbers that I see, from the community, from the parents, we don't have enough fields to play. We just don't. So people will say, oh, well, you have Rhinebeck. You guys combine with Rhinebeck. Well, Rhinebeck combined with Red Hook because Rhinebeck had a dwindling amount of players because they have chosen other sports. But when you look at this and you say, okay, we want to do, walking paths, or we want to do, clean space, whatever. Bottom line is we just don't have the fields. I'm sorry. I know people want to say we don't want to see it developed into a park. We don't want to see it, more parks and more fields. The facts don't lie. If you were to ask most of the parents that come out to the games and most of the parents that have kids that are playing, we don't have enough. We just don't. That's just the bottom line. So from our aspect, from the people that I have talked to and from the people that have expressed interest to me, the field would be, and the park would be something advantageous to us locally. Unfortunately, our field at the rec park, it's aging. We could do some better games. We could have a lot more community outreach. It's just, I feel bad for most of the parents that have kids in Little League or in the, softball, flag football league, because I feel most of them weren't aware that this was going on because I'm at these fields every day. I'm there. I just came from there. I just spent there with my daughter, with my son, with my younger daughter. I'm there tomorrow. I'm there pretty much every day. So I don't really agree that not doing more fields is positive for the community. I think we need them. I'm sorry. I don't really see, I haven't seen these surveys. The parents that I've talked to haven't seen these surveys. I've seen a couple show up on Facebook. As soon as they show up, people comment, then they're gone. So there's definitely, to me, we can look at this from a different angle and welcome it. I don't think we should be saying, forget it, we're not doing this, this is crazy. I saw some people saying they want to do walking paths like in New York City, raised, elevated. No, this is not, we're not trying to make it, suburbia, East Fishkill, this is Red Hook. We have fields, the community uses them, the kids love them, we're all there, it keeps kids out of trouble. I don't know. I'm sorry that I see the survey and the time and the effort that was put into this, and then to talk to parents on the Little League program and say, we've never even seen any of this stuff. So all the parents that are out there, currently in the fall ball program, we have 58 girls, right? 43 boys, more girls than we've had in previous years. None of them have seen any of these surveys except for the ones on Facebook. They've seen the surveys that the town has put out, but they have not seen the survey that you guys are answering, because I've looked at every one of them, because people are coming to me with questions. So I'm not trying to put anybody down. I don't want to make anybody upset, but unfortunately from the Little League standpoint, the field usage is far exceeding what we can allow. Allowing these fields to come in, I think would help the community. I think it's better for the community. It's better for the kids. Keeping the kids active is where it's at. Keeping the kids away from the fields by not allowing them to have field time, it's not worth it. It's going to cause more problems in the community. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes,
John.
I just had a couple questions about the survey. Was it done anonymously? Did people
Yes.
put down their names? So we don't know who these people are. We don't know their ages. We don't know if they have children. We know nothing about them. So how do we know they're from Red Hook? I mean, how do you really know that, seriously?
We provided a zip code and we provided an incentive for
And
response.
they put down a zip code and they said this, but they didn't, there's no way you can verify the people that.
And we
How do
have-
we know that 10 people didn't submit 101?
We have their information individually collected. The survey was conducted and constructed in a way that.
So you
one
have their
response
names,
per
their
We have-
addresses, their phone numbers,
We
their
have the
emails,
ability
everything. Could
to-
we have that?
No, John, it would be,
I want to see it.
no, I know, it's an
That's-
IP address, so you can only submit one from, you'd have to go find 100 different computers.
SurveyMonkey actually allows you to make sure that people don't.
Yes.
will
Yeah,
respond.
so that's a pretty.
Yes, but I'm saying is, where did they call from? Can you tell that's a computer in Red Hook? Can you tell that's a computer in Rhinebeck or Kingston or
They could have
Fishkill?
lied and said that they aren't, but
All
people
right.
can lie. The
Now,
point
the
is-
one that the town did, you identified the person, where they live, all that kind of stuff, and it's, I have a real problem with that.
The
you know.
question is, so if
You know.
if you have a problem with the survey, then maybe a broader survey needs to be done.
Right.
That,
Okay.
that accounts for all
That
these issues
accounts
you
for
Well,
the
have.
questions that we're asking
Well,
individual
that's,
surveys.
that's one of my questions.
John, if you would
I,
address the board, public comment
Okay.
is really for
well, my other question is, I see what else you'd like to see in the plan, walking paths, trees, spots, all of it's part of our plan. When you, and you look at ideally keep a plot of land as natural, that's part of it. Blend of passive recreation and sports, that's part of it. I don't know if, I mean, all of it's there. If you looked at the plan, you would know that that's already there. That this was all included in it when that site was developed. I mean, if you write this stuff down as if it doesn't exist, that it's not part of the plan, and it is part of the plan, and I don't understand that.
Okay, thank you.
But-
We're gonna
all right.
project the plan up on the screen.
Can I just say, just to like put on the record that our survey also, people could have put in a fake zip code or whatever. So that's an issue with any of these online surveys, and I just want to put that out
Yeah.
there for any of them that, it's easy to, to fake
Right.
that, so.
Okay, anybody else wanna make some public
I have a really
comments?
quick
Shane?
question. So at the same time that this, or at roughly the same time that this survey went out, there was a survey that was done by the town, and I was wondering if those results were available.
I think we're gonna hear about them.
Oh, yeah, okay, all
Yeah.
right, sorry, okay.
Okay. Anybody else wanna make some comments? Francisco, please.
So, I just come from, my point of view on all this is, obviously, if we need more fields, we should have them. If we need a Versailles Palace, we should have it. I guess I come from a point of view of government efficiency. Is developing that field the most efficient thing right now, or are there creative solutions in this day and age combining? And I don't have the answer to that, so I wish I did. But if the baseball guys need more baseball fields, if the soccer people need more soccer fields, let's do it. But can we utilize what we have or the surrounding areas that we have, maintain those better, improve how we're following up on them, and use those more efficiently, combine resources with other towns to use them, just like the teams are combining. So purely from an efficiency point of view, is this the best way to handle it, or is it not? So 25 years ago maybe, today let's review it and say, hey, maybe there's more creative ways to do it, so everybody gets more fields. I mean, instead of getting one thing, we get 2 or 3 out of it.
Right.
We get baseball fields, we get soccer fields, and we get walking paths,
Again, you're gonna see some of that
Okay.
on the screen in just a few minutes. Would anybody else like to make some comments? Okay. I don't normally respond to public comment, but I think it's important that I respond to Brian, to your comments, Brian Fuhr, okay? A couple of things, and I recognize that you're fairly new to the community and maybe not, experienced with public input. So I will tell you, personally, I can only speak for myself, that I fought to keep public comment period as part of these meetings years ago. I fought 2 years ago to keep that camera running to make sure everybody in town and villages can see what this government is doing. Work to get screens so that the public can see what we're working on. And in fact, tonight would be an opportunity for the public to actually use the screens for what they wanted to discuss as well. As far as opening up for public comment, with regard to this project has been in the works since 2007 till when the land was purchased. This project, the way it is adopted, the plan now that is adopted, not the one we're discussing possibly amending, the plan that's adopted back in 2013 was sent to every household in the town of Red Hook twice on the front page of our local newspaper. Once to solicit input, one to notify landowners and residents that the plan was up for adoption. And I can tell you at those two meetings, because I reviewed both the videotape and the minutes, 3 people showed up. In 2016, recognizing what had been known all along, that we would probably need to put away some money and to get some grant money, and we got a grant to make up the difference between a regular field and a field that could be used by all individuals. We went out for that grant in 2016. We had a public hearing for that. Nobody came and objected to it. In 2017, we received the grant. Nobody came and objected to it. So we do everything we can. We have a fairly robust email list. I note that some of the people who are neighbors to the project were included on all those emails that were sent out over the years. And yet at the last minute, when we were implementing this project, folks said, how about some public input? And I said, let's do it. Let's have an info session for the neighbors. And then the neighbors wanted to have more public input, and we had 3 more sessions. Folks could come in and share with us exactly what you've done. And we did actually get people coming in and contributing some really good input. And the plan that you will see is modified because of the input. But I will tell you, that said, phase 1 is simply some parking and 1 multi-purpose field that is also ADA compliant. So several sports can happen on the 1 field. It's ADA compliant. We will be doing some rough grading, which we did actually not that many years ago. When we purchased the property, there were giant mounds. Those of you who lived next to the property know we've already done that. And the developer did that years prior. We are going to do some rough grading in such a way that there will be 3 level areas on the south side that will be open for people to use for all types of activities, including casual sports, walking their dog, those kinds of things that are mentioned here in the in your list. So I'd like us to take a look at all the stuff that you've submitted and see how we can further incorporate that into phase 1, into phase 2, and there may even be a phase 3. But I know that this plan is very different than the plan that was adopted in 2013, in part because of you all coming out and speaking with us, and also a lot of things that we learned in the last 5 or 6 months about what the status of existing fields are, and I think Brandy is going to speak to that. I want to talk about the issue of your emails being rejected, okay? The firm that did the survey, which by the way has the contract to do the design work, this board already has agreed to build a Challenger field, has already agreed many months ago to hire this firm after going out to bid to do the design work. That is settled. There's no issue surrounding that. This firm has nothing to do with the email problem you had. We switched over to a new website, and unbeknownst to us, we had problems with Gmail accounts all across the spectrum there. So many of these individuals here have Gmail accounts that when you send it to redhook.org, it automatically gets forwarded to their Gmail account. Unbeknownst to us, it was being rejected. We did work with our vendor, Civic Plus, and we've gotten that straightened out for a week. But nobody was being blocked from having an email, okay? I just want to make sure that that's understood. Did you want to make some public comments? Because then I want to get on
I
to,
just wanted to
Yes, ma'am.
address a comment that you made.
yes ma'am.
You said that when you held these meetings prior, that you did not receive any objections to any of your plans, but did you receive any support? I mean, if you had 3 people coming,
I'm quoting from 2013. I was not here on the board in 2013. I looked back because when folks asked for public input, which that's my natural inclination, is to get with the public and you know, get them on board with what's happening so that they're aware of what's going on. I hold neighborhood meetings and so on and so forth. But in 2013, I was not here, so I looked back in the minutes. I actually watched those meetings to see who was here, and there were a couple of requests from neighbors as far as buffers, and that's essentially what transpired in 2013.
May I ask an additional question?
Yes.
I appreciate that Challenger was retained beforehand, but I also wonder if it's not a public conflict of interest for a firm that's already retained to ask public questions of a survey and of broad user needs. Is there no bias there?
Okay, well, I think Brandy is going to try to attempt to answer your question.
No, the question is financial and structural. You paid them and you put them on retainer to address and develop a piece of land, and you've also asked them to get public survey input. Is there no bias in that structure? I'm just asking. It doesn't sound right.
Here's the problem with your assumption, is that I believe you are assuming the project is not going forward. And so your assumption is that because you...
No, I'm not assuming it's not going forward.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's going forward,
Okay,
and the firm that's decided it's going forward is also conducting the survey and getting the information that's going forward.
okay. Well, Brandy's gonna talk to the role that a survey takes place and reference organizations that do this routinely, okay? So if I could, if it's all right with you all, I'd like to move on to that item in the agenda so that you could start to take a look at what we have received, what the plan looks like versus what was adopted previously. Okay, shall we do that? Brandy.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Brandy Nelson, professional engineer with Ty and Bond Engineering. Nice to see you all. It's been a couple of weeks. When we were here 2 weeks ago, we looked at some of the preliminary findings for the field utilization study. I do have a draft hard copy of that field utilization study that I wanted to pass out to the board members. It is undergoing our internal QA/QC, and there's a couple of little drawing references, things like that, that I know we need to get corrected. But I did also want to get some early feedback from you beyond what we discussed 2 weeks ago when we presented some preliminary findings, so I'll give those to you now. So, first of all, just want to point out that the purpose of the athletic field utilization report was in the context of some larger planning around improvements to recreational facilities. There was a desire to review existing utilization in more detail and confirm what the demand is. We hear hypothetically or theoretically or anecdotally from John and folks with Little League and some of the other organized sports, as well as at the high school, that there are challenges related to the fields, and that has informed some of the discussion over the last 10 years or so about planning for recreational facilities. We said at the outset that this was going to be very narrowly scoped around athletic fields, that this is not intended to replace the 1994 study that was done. If the town wanted to do so in the future, this report could be a component of a broader recreational needs assessment that would go community-wide. So, just in general, our scope consisted of 4 principal tasks. We wanted to review and inventory the existing fields that the town has and assess their characteristics, their condition, their geometry, understand what resources are here in the town. And then we wanted to review existing field utilization, both by sport and user groups. Then we wanted to take a look at benchmarking using national data from the 2018 National Parks and Recreation Association performance benchmarks. That's an industry standard for evaluating recreational facilities, including athletic fields. And then we were asked to engage in a community-wide needs assessment survey. And again, everything is tailored around athletic fields. The next slide, please. Once again, this graphic did not print, and I do not know why. I apologize for that. So I believe I sent it to the town as a separate document following last week's. Ryan and I think that the problem is that it's a smart graphic. So we don't have that separately, do we? Right.
I can grab my laptop and we can put it up, but.
Yeah, that's fine, you can just take it from here. Just hit the HDMI.
Okay. Is yours here?
If you open it up.
I have it on a thumb drive.
Okay.
Actually, I have it on a thumb drive. Maybe it would show up better there.
No, my thumb drive won't work on this.
Oh,
If you open up yours. You want to come back to that slide?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
that. Okay.
Is that a graphic in this?
It is in your packet, yeah, it's in Appendix A. Basically, what it indicates is that there's 2 categories of fields, and the first category are the publicly owned fields. So those are the fields associated with the recreation park. The recreation park has the north, middle, and south ball fields. It also has near, just north of the tree line that runs left, right through the graphic, what we're calling an overflow field. Historically, that space had been used for volleyball, but with some of the pressure that is experienced on ball fields, that space is sort of informally programmed around athletic field sports. And then in the next slide, we looked at, among the municipally owned fields, we included the Village of Tivoli Stephen Kuhn Memorial Field, also a diamond field located in the Village of Tivoli and maintained by the Village of Tivoli. And then in the next slide, we've got, again, publicly owned fields, Town of Red Hook, high and middle school fields. These are principally rectangular fields. There are 7 rectangular fields at the high school. And then in the lower right corner of the graphic, there are additional overflow fields, again with programming requirements. Various field sport activities are played in that area, including some of the t-ball activities, as well as practice football and some of the modified football. Then in the next slide, there's the Red Hook Elementary School, which has an overflow field that is informal and programmed for some field activities necessary. And the next slide after that is the Red Hook Soccer Club. Again, Red Hook Soccer Club is a private club. They have a lease on some land on Rockefeller Lane. And the fields are striped. They're varying size fields, so some regulation, some not regulation for a variety of user groups. But again, this is a private club facility on private land. The next slide. Then there's Father Carroll Field. It's a little league field just south of 199, baseball diamond. That is owned by the Catholic Diocese of New York. And in the next slide. So once we inventoried each of the fields, we went out to the publicly owned fields only. So that would be the Rec Park fields, Stephen Kuhn Field, and we looked at the condition of each of the fields. Our field assessment included things like a review of the dimensions of the field, the geometry of the field, the facilities at the field. So does it have lighting? What does it have for drainage? Is it irrigated? What's the condition of fencing, the dugouts? Are there any other components to the field that are noteworthy and what is their condition in general. And then in the next slide, just further condition assessment. What's the soil condition? Is the site handicap accessible? Are there any safety considerations? Is it proximate to buildings, private residences? What's the condition of the turf? All of the fields are turf fields, and there's a standard assessment of turf condition ranging from unusable, that would be where you've got hard-packed bare earth, where you don't want hard-packed bare earth, all the way to excellent density grass. So we gave a qualitative assessment of turf condition. And then provided an evaluation summary on each field, made some general conclusions about the field. That was done for each of the fields that are municipally owned. What we found with the fields is, in looking at their existing uses and conditions, is that the town is really working, and I think, Sarah, you had asked this question a couple weeks ago when we were talking. The town makes do with what they have, and they program it as best they can. We did note in the study that each of the fields has dimensional limitations. And Ryan, you can feel free to chime in if I say anything that needs to be expanded on. But there are preferred dimensions. Those preferred dimensions are related to the particular sport's governing body's specifications for play on that field. So where your user group is maybe more junior or not affiliated with a competitive team, or that's another example, not in a formal league, playing on a field that doesn't meet the preferred dimensions is really less of an issue. But we did want to point out, what the limitations are on each of the existing fields as far as the types of sports that could be played there. So for instance, with the North softball field, right now it plays at the preferred dimensions for girls' high school softball and Little League softball. It would not be acceptable for the adult male slow pitch softball or the women's softball. So those are limitations that the Recreation Department has when a user group approaches them and says, can we play on this field, or what's your field availability? So those are things we just want to keep in mind as we're looking at the utilization as we get into that.
I do want to point out a typo on this table. This table 2-5 is for Father Carroll Field, not for the South Baseball Field.
Correct.
So after we looked at, how many fields do you have, what's their condition, what we wanted to look at is how are those fields utilized, and is the town getting the maximum utilization out of these fields given their conditions. Utilization is governed by many things, but very typically 3 common things come to light. Lighting on a field, so a field is only available for users a certain number of hours per day during certain weather conditions. But lighting on a field can extend the availability of a field for play. So that is something that factors into whether or not a field is able to be utilized. The field's condition, so very commonly, as is shown in the left picture, field conditions such as a drainage condition, coupled with a wet year, can result in a very play-unfriendly surface with standing water or slippery infill, and can result in a less than desirable field condition, but it can also result in a dangerous field condition where injuries can occur. So field condition is very important. And then user schedule. So as we point out in the study, field availability is defined around our work and school schedules. So while we're in work or in school, obviously we're not going to say that a field is available because the leagues aren't available, the club groups aren't available, we're all occupied otherwise. So in that framework then, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
Did you want to tell everybody which fields these are?
Sure,
You
sure.
see them struggling to figure out which ones they
Yeah,
are.
sure. So the photo on the left is Stephen Kuhn Field.
Say that again?
That's Stephen Kuhn
It's Tivoli.
Field. That's
Tivoli
Tivoli's field.
That's what I thought.
Uh,
Field on the right is the middle softball field at the rec park.
Right. And so that middle field does have lights on it. We wanted to just point that out. It's the only field that Red Hook Town owns. Stephen Kuhn Field also has lights. That one's programmed by the village though.
John, I have those lights as not operational. Have you seen those lights in use of recent at Stephen Kuhn Memorial Field?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I think they use them though.
What's the condition of the fields? Are they being properly maintained to whatever the things that you were looking for? And do they all have lighting so that we can utilize them more?
Nope. Only Stephen Kuhn Field and the middle softball field have lighting on them right now.
And what was the condition in terms of the grounds that you comment?
Every field's got a little bit different condition. So Stephen Kuhn Field has historically had drainage problems. It's just a very difficult soil. It probably wasn't constructed originally with any under drains.
So it'd be useful to improve them and put lighting on the other two?
It depends on what the community really wants. Yeah, absolutely. So as far as field utilization, we took the characteristics of the field and then we worked with the recreation department and also the athletic director to look at what are they scheduling on those fields now. So 2 caveats for field utilization. You'll see here we're looking at fall and
Randy,
spring.
Just to clarify, you mean the athletic director at the school?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you. Organized sports typically shut down in winter for obvious reasons. We are in a climate with snow and frozen ground conditions, so there typically are not organized field sports in winter. And then in the summertime, outside of recreation programming, there typically aren't considerable organized sports in the summer. So your primary seasons for field utilization are fall and spring, and those tend to correlate with the organized sports teams. And so what this chart on the left shows for the fall season is that that's okay, I can explain it. The blue bar associated with each line is the number of hours that a field is available. And so that availability is typically from the time that school gets out, say 3 o'clock, to the mean time for dusk during the fall season, which would be 7 o'clock. So that's 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, plus time on the weekends. And I believe we said 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturday, and 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Sunday.
Correct.
And so the fields have a basic available time to be utilized. The red bar is based on input from the high school athletic director and the recreation department, how many different hours of time they need to schedule that field for practice and play time. So you can see in many instances, we are, particularly with the high school fields, the need and the availability are very close together. Now you may say, oh, there's a little bit more availability, and what we want to just caution you on is that you don't want your fields to be used 100% of the time that they're available, because it doesn't give you time for maintenance, and particularly with turf fields, it doesn't give you time to let that turf rest. The turf needs some time to rest so that the roots can be reestablished, so that any turf maintenance activities can occur. And so there are challenges. You don't want to have your field use and your field availability really be very close. You want to have a margin in there. You also want that margin in case you have any weather conditions that result in games being canceled. You want to have some flexibility to schedule around.
Can I add a little bit?
Absolutely.
So another key point to make is that the high school has begun to push out of their multi-purpose rectangular fields. You'll notice that at the elementary school and at the middle school, there's time being used, but the high school wasn't originally allotted those spaces. They've worked out time that they can go to the elementary school and do typically what is their youth group practices. So it would be freshman, practices would be at the elementary school. That's for their football team and for their soccer teams. They've moved to elementary school. And another note that might be curious for the board members is you'll notice a lot of time for the baseball fields. It looks like the baseball fields are available.
But it's key to point out that baseball, while there is fall ball being played, it's not the main time fall ball is being played. Baseball is typically played in the springtime. And so while these fields are available, that's not typically the sport that's being played at that time.
And so with that as a segue, if we
Yeah.
hand over
I got a
to
quick question before we
spring
move on that.
season.
So the Red Hook soccer fields are not listed there, but they were in the previous discussion. Why is that?
Right, the Red Hook Soccer Club had participated in a public meeting and had let us know that they feel that they are totally utilized. And so we limited the scope of this utilization study to publicly owned fields, not privately owned fields.
Okay, so I was the former president of the soccer club, and I'm well aware of the usage of those fields. If it's not included for the purposes, because you're only limiting it to public fields, that's one thing, but to make the claim that they're already fully utilized is not true.
And we were told that they weren't included because there's something in the contract with Red Hook Soccer Club that says that only members of the club are allowed to use those fields. Is that accurate?
It's the easement. The easement on the property speaks to that it can only be the Red Hook Soccer Club. There's a lease that's existing, and when the Red Hook Soccer Club ceases to use the property, then it has to revert back to agriculture.
Right, but there is nothing excluding people to sign a waiver, as they sometimes do, to use the club property for other purposes.
Like an adult ultimate.
Yeah, so we have adult players, they're not members of the club. Their kids might play on the club, some do, some don't. We've asked them in the past to sign a waiver
Or if there
and
was
use the
like,
fields.
yeah.
I think what you're referring to, Robert, is if the club ceased to exist. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about utilization of those fields over and above what the club's use would be.
Yeah, no, what I was saying about is what's in the easement, which allows the continuance of the Red Hook Soccer Club. Easements are for property.
Yep.
And so it dictates that the Red Hook Soccer Club may use that property. It does not dictate that anybody else can use that property.
But the Red Hook Soccer Club is allowed to use the property for other uses besides paid members, right? If they give permission to do so.
That's between you and the people who hold the easement. That's not something we would really enter into any kind of.
It would be worth a discussion if there was a need and interest in more fields. Sorry to sidetrack you, I just was noticing it was missing off of this.
Sure. So for spring season, spring sports tend to be geared more towards diamond sports, but there is also some of the spring soccer. And so with the spring season in particular, you see again a very close match to total hours available and total hours needed. Again, to the point where there is this push into the overflow spaces for user groups that maybe have a lower demand for a dimensionally appropriate field. Also, we wanted to point out, and Ryan can jump in here, but I believe fields 4 and 1, those have drainage problems that tend to be worse in the springtime.
I believe high school field 1 is their field hockey field, and they cut it quite short for field hockey play. So they'd like to give it the spring season to recover after the winter, and then field 4 is a drainage issue that they like. It sits most of spring, so by the time they can play on it, school's almost over.
So there's limitations in use associated with field condition there in those instances. So the next slide then. We looked at, you'll have to zoom back out for this one because this is a table we had to cut in half because it was too long. It ended up being tiny text. But we wanted to look then not only at field utilization based on schedule, but field utilization based on user type. So who's playing on which fields where, and are they able to play at their preferred dimension? So this is just aggregating spring and fall use. And so you can see that in the black text is the identification of a particular field. In the green text is users playing at their preferred dimensions, and in the red text are users playing on a field at less than preferred dimensions. So again, as I had mentioned before, the town makes do as much as they can and tries to schedule the fields as extensively as they can. After looking at field utilization, we took a look at benchmarking. Benchmarking is a process of looking at standards produced by industry groups and governmental bodies that provide a series of metrics that one group can compare themselves to another group. So the National Recreation and Parks Association is an organization that represents recreation and park facilities and agencies around the United States. They're pretty much the industry standard for recreational facilities assessments, and their scope is very, very broad. In this instance, consistent with looking at athletic fields, we looked at their 2018 benchmarking report with a specific focus on outdoor park and recreation facilities. And they benchmark against a lot of different metrics. What we looked for was metrics that was consistent with the town of Red Hook, just to try and get you as close to peer communities as possible. And so in this case, we looked at the metrics of outdoor recreation facilities based on population density for communities with 500 people per square mile or less. Okay, so smaller communities. I wanted to just give you a for example because I think the question will be, well, what other metrics are there? So let's just take an example here. If we look at youth diamond fields, it's the top row there, diamond fields for youth baseball. And the way the metrics works is it basically says there's one facility per 6,628 residents. And so that would mean there's one youth baseball diamond for every 600 or 6,628 residents. And then we would look at that versus the town of Red Hook's population, which is about 11,100 people. And that would give you a benchmark of how many facilities you would have for a certain population. And what has happened over the years is NRPA used to have a situation where they'd say, you need to have X number of fields. What they've tried to do is go more to a database approach where they are now seeking input on a regular basis from communities across the country to find out, because there's so much variation in communities' economic capabilities, their demographics from an age standpoint, and their interests in different types of sports, they're more broad-based. They're actually taking data now to produce this benchmarking metrics instead of being prescriptive and telling you a community of 11,000 people needs to have 2 fields. Okay, so this allows you to compare where you are against your peer group.
A quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned population. Now, I'm assuming from what you're saying when you say population, it's all ages.
All ages, yes.
Even up to my age, of all
Even
things.
up to your age and maybe beyond.
But and is it more appropriate to look at and there is information it's rather precise of the quantity of people, the number of kids.
Sure.
And Red Hook only has something like 1,600 kids to school age.
Right. So I believe that was a question you guys had 2 weeks ago. We did go back and dig a little bit further into NRPA's data. I couldn't find anything that benchmarked against number of children in a community. It might be because that maybe is a more dynamic number, I don't know. And I have not had a chance to reach out to any of their folks to further investigate that. I did, though, take a look at some of the other benchmark examples, just to give you some perspective on the number that we selected. We selected a conservative number, so we didn't select the highest ratio or the lowest ratio. We tried to pick a conservative number. So this is for diamond fields. We selected the benchmark for 500, less than or equal to 500 people per square mile. Another option would be for communities less than 20,000 people. Using that benchmark, it would say that you need 1 field for every 3,250 people. They had a benchmark based on the type of municipality, a village, a town, a city, a metropolitan area. That benchmarked at 5,051 people per field. And then they had a regional benchmark, so we would be technically classified as a mid-Atlantic state. And mid-Atlantic states typically have one field for every 6,304 people based on their data. So we did try and stay more towards the conservative end there, so we're not giving you the, you could pick amongst these different benchmarks, and we tried to stay on the conservative side. So going down through the benchmarking data, what became apparent to us is that based on the benchmarking, the possible areas where you could look at adding facilities to be closer to your benchmark communities would be rectangular multipurpose fields. So anything that's in the red text on the right column, a diamond t-ball field, a rectangular football field, a rectangular lacrosse field, rectangular field hockey field. So in general, rectangular fields seem to have some opportunities based on benchmarking. After looking at the benchmarking in the report, we also have a section on...
Hey, I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick question? The fellow was here, was talking about Little League fields. So do you have something specifically related to that? And whether how it's benchmarked?
Sure. Youth baseball fields?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's important is that there's benchmarking and then there's also utilization. So you don't look at any of these things in a silo all by themselves. You look at them together and how they relate to one another. So in our previous step looking at utilization, what we saw there is that the fields are utilized to a very significant extent, particularly in the spring baseball season, to the point where they get a lot of wear and tear on the fields, but where they're also pushing baseball play into these more informal areas.
Can I help?
Yeah, thanks.
So one of the key points of this utilization study was we didn't want to discount any fields in the community. There's a really small note that's tough to tell in this conversation. But as one of the facilities we've actually pointed towards Stephen Kuhn Memorial Field as being a possible place for the Little League to play. But currently right now they're not playing on that field at all. It's a field condition issue, so part of what they're seeing right now is that they don't have that field available and they're being pushed out. We've noted that down here, in the table. We just want to make sure to point that out.
Brian and Brandon, can I ask you also,
Sure.
so when the NERPA, is that the
Sure.
association,
NRPA,
when they're
yeah.
talking about these recommendations, are they considering school fields plus town fields, or are those specifically municipally, like when the recommendation is a certain amount per 1,000 people or whatever? Is that
I
in consideration
actually
of school?
don't know. I don't recall reading a distinction in
And the reason I
study.
ask is
Yeah.
because like looking at this,
Do you know
so
offhand, Brian?
I would just be shocked to find that municipal field hockey or football teams, like high school, like normal sized football, not flag football, but you know what I'm saying, like would be something that a lot of municipalities are doing. And so when I look at that, I just see I see the 0 for field hockey fields.
Water form for that?
No, I'm saying like when you look on here, right, on the table, rectangular fields, football field, that you haven't said what age, but I'm assuming that means a typical high school, when we say it's a football field long, I'm assuming that's what it means, right? Like the 100 yards, whatever it is, right? Yeah, so it says 0, right, but we have one in Red Hook, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's
You're-
just a school-owned field,
It's-
right?
It's
But-
defined in there as responded by public parks recreation groups, which wouldn't include school. Like in your own community, you have a public park director and you have a
Yeah.
school director, and they're separate entities.
Okay, so you think that they're making a distinction between those two
This
groups.
distinction
That's what I'm
between the two.
asking.
Yeah, I think they state that the respondents, I forget the number of respondents, but it's public parks directors, not athletic directors from high schools.
And do you typically see that? Because I know you work with more municipalities than I'm familiar with personally, that municipalities are maintaining field hockey fields, football fields, that kind of thing, like separate from school districts? Because I'm surprised to.
No, I do think that is the case. And I mean, Ryan has spent several years of his career just doing, but mostly.
Typically, they won't call them out as a field. If you build a multi-purpose rectangular field, like we've shown in your master plan, that's 360 feet long and 210 feet wide, it becomes a field that could be a football field in the fall or a lacrosse field in the spring. It's just a field for people to play. It's not necessarily your football field. The one key component of a football field is uprights, and I don't see a lot of uprights on community fields.
Yeah, that's okay.
But I think you find that happy medium where it's a place the public could play and practice, and maybe you do one upright or something like that.
Another question I have is, so let's say that, in 5 years after, if we build this facility and you've got that 360-foot long multi-purpose field area, how do you account for that on a table like this? Like, does it go to where do you put that one in the table? Do you know what I'm saying? Or do you split it? Like, how would you account for that?
There is multi-purpose rectangular field in here.
Okay, so you would just put it there. So what I'm saying is so then we're always gonna come up short.
I would think as a
Do you know what I'm
community, if you had a +5 in multi-purpose rectangular fields and you were -5 when you combined football field and soccer field, you would be able to understand that those two are equaling out with each other and you're good.
And
You're
really,
meeting the benchmark.
that is the reason that they've moved away from this prescriptive approach. It's to benchmark you and let you make those decisions as a community. What's important to the community, what's already being programmed, what need is there for additional programming, what flexibility do you want to build in. So it's not a prescription that you need to have those fields, it's just giving you some feedback as to where you compared to
So when we
similar
look at this
communities.
table, if we know with a fair reasonability that the town's not going to ever have a field hockey field, then we can say that's okay. The 0.5 negative is something we're not concerned about, for example. Okay.
What is the total on the right side between the pluses and minuses?
They are not cumulative, so there's not a totaling that is.
Because if you were -1 rectangular field, but you were +2 baseball fields, you couldn't
There's not
play
equivalency
soccer.
there.
Some of them can be
Some of them
collapsed,
could be
some of them
combined.
cannot,
Again,
sure.
there's a degree of judgment that needs to come into the discussion around the decision making. So
Hang on one second, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Technical difficulties here.
I never have technical difficulties, so I can't really know. We couldn't get that one image to print, so.
Don't look at the screen,
How do you
you'll get.
Yeah, if you just scroll right there, stop. Community input is the slide we want to look at, so I think that's 19. Yep. So again, among the 4 tasks for this utilization study, one task included gathering some additional community input. Again, I think there's been a good discussion here tonight about what the history of community input has been over the years for various recreational facilities in the community. As it relates to this particular activity, as the supervisor mentioned, Recreation Committee had hosted 4 meetings, initially as an outreach around a particular development, and it's expanded in there into a more open and wide-ranging discussion of athletic field topics. So in that context, part of our scope of work for the utilization study was to do a community survey with the objective of having an additional tool. Again, none of these things sort of stand on their own by themselves to make decisions for you. They're all information that goes into allowing you guys to be informed. So we collected some demographic information, provided an opportunity for feedback on topics related to how fields are used currently. The scope was intentionally narrow to athletic fields, as stated in the outset. The survey was put out via the town's website, and there were 92 respondents from the town and the village, both villages. With the population of 11,000, that does work out to be just about 1% of the town responding, so that needs to be factored in as well. It's a tool, it's not the decision-making factor. But community surveys, again, they provide insights into how the community feels about a particular topic. But as we point out in this quote from NRPA's September 2017 article entitled "Overcoming the Flaws of Needs Assessment," it identifies that surveys are sort of the industry standard for soliciting input, but it cautions users on that being the gold standard, that you need to be a little bit more broad to understand the nuances of the narrative in your community and really use a variety of tools around decision making on facilities in your community. So again, just emphasizing this is just one of the tools, and this study was focused principally on looking at the actual utilization of the fields to confirm the demand requirements of those fields. So again, just to recap, we looked at existing field inventory and assessment of characteristics, condition, and geometry. We looked at the field utilization by sport and user group. What we found was that it indicates that the fields are nearly fully utilized in the spring and fall. There's some difficulty in rescheduling if there's bad weather conditions. Overflow areas are being used.
Can I
Yes.
a question? When you say user group, are you counting not the broader population measure of the town, but the number of teams, the number of Little League teams and that are from our town? I don't mean from surrounding towns. And I just said Little League, but for soccer and whatever else.
Yeah.
And the number of teams seem to be, to me, to be a critical measure, more so than the number of 8-year-olds, to pick a number.
Sure, yeah. We tried through our interview activities to capture all the different team type groups. We do have a caveat in the report indicating that the limitation of looking at field utilization doesn't capture those infrequent users, like different fundraising activities that might have a charity softball event, or maybe more informal type play where a subset of Little League wants to go out and practice their pitching one day. So we did not include those in field utilization, and so those are definitely areas that are unaccounted for.
The casual user.
Casual users, informal play.
But the scheduled users is what I would be most interested in, knowing how many they are and really how many teams there are.
Do you know
More so
what the
than the
actual head count is? I mean,
population.
we could go back up to one of the tables. We have all the user groups listed.
We have
so.
user groups, but inside each one of those user groups
many?
is multiple teams, and on a given year, we have Little League here, but in 2017, their teams might be 50, but in 2018 it might be 51. It depends on the number of kids they get and how they can break that up into an even number of teams.
But in
The number of
cemetery,
teams.
it doesn't really matter number of teams, like, because it matters how much time they're spending. So for
Yeah.
example, in.
Well, the
in
number of
so-
teams
so
is
for example, in the-
directly related to.
No, it's really not. So listen, so the soccer club has a U14 team that only fielded enough people to have 2 teams. So they play each other every Saturday.
Mhm.
They use that field as much as we would use it for if 4 teams had, like you know what I'm saying? Like they still.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, but
But-
why does number of teams matter if we're talking about, like that table mainly focuses on the amount of time, like how much is schedulable and then how much is scheduled, so why would it matter if it
The
was 50 teams
the
or 25
scheduling
teams?
is based on the number of teams who want to use that field, not on the number of kids,
I mean, so
that
Brian
particular
said that
age.
they're maybe turning away teams, so maybe there's a way to show that, but that's kind of anecdotal, right? Like you could have like an asterisk that says anecdotally in 2018, we had to turn away this many tournaments or this many whatever, right? But I don't know.
Harry, if you had number of teams, what would you compare it to know if you had enough fields or not enough fields?
I don't have to compare it to much of anything other than the clock.
Okay.
If I know we have three, I'm just picking numbers, we have 3 Little League teams, so those teams are gonna play once a week, each, and they're gonna play from a team from some other town, so, that's another assumption I would make, that each of those teams is going, so we would have 3 fields that would be used for however, those games take 2 hours at the most. I think they're limited by the
But Harry,
rules.
you're forgetting that these teams practice all week long. As same as the flag football,
All
only
right,
plays on Saturday.
let me listen to
And
the
they're
coach,
practicing all week long,
to the
you know.
coach. He's
Okay, so on a given week, whether it's spring or fall,
Yeah.
we have the north, the middle, and the southern field.
Mhm.
On just the north and the middle field, which keep in mind are non-raised mound fields. Non-raised mound fields are for girls to play softball. Raised mound fields in the southern field are for baseball for boys. Father Carroll Field you can't take into consideration because that's a privately owned field. We could get canned from that field at any time. So we have those 3 fields to mess with, okay? So in softball alone in 2018, in the spring season, we had 2 minors teams, 2 majors teams, 2 juniors teams. That's 6 teams, okay? Those 6 teams on those 2 fields have to take into consideration the junior varsity team, the modified team, and the varsity team. Now, when you take into consideration the school teams practice on those fields with those 3 different teams at different times, I have to take into consideration my 6 teams that I have to get onto those 2 fields to give them practices and to give them games. So, take into consideration how many practices that the school has, how many practices Little League has, now putting games into play. We all fight over the field for Saturdays. We can barely get people to get there on a Sunday because you have now weather coming into play when games get canceled. Now you got to deal with the makeup. So again, you've got the north, you've got the middle, right? Then you got the southern field. The southern field is a whole nother ball game because you have all the boys playing there with their, teams. So those 3 fields at the rec park on any given day, whether it's spring or fall, are packed. Okay, I have to keep kids playing there on Sundays, which parents hate. We have to schedule games with umpires on any beck and call at the last minute around the school schedule because the school schedule changes on a dime. So I can't, to say that we don't have enough fields, to say that trying to pay attention to time there, look, I'm doing the schedules for those 3 fields, and it's a lot. So I've seen people come out. I mean, we live there on those fields. We don't have enough fields. So to say that there is a comparison on a chart to say how many people are on the field and how many teams, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is this, I'm doing it. The scheduling for these 3 fields does not support the amount of teams we have to play for this community. So you can say we have enough and we can move them here. Well, look, I'm sending kids to practice at the middle school that doesn't have a diamond, that doesn't have bases, that doesn't have backstops. If you look at Lambs, Linden Avenue Middle School, okay, those two fields, they're not lined. They don't have a pitching mound. They don't have bases. They're out there in the grass. I'm sorry, but however you look at it, you can go to Mill Road and play in the grass. We're sending kids in different teams at different age levels, whether it's t-ball, softball, coach pitch, baseball, junior league, junior senior league. Now you go to baseball, minors, majors, juniors, junior seniors. We're scattering these kids wherever we can go. So I find it very hard to look at the screen and say, okay, let's look at a chart and say how many teams and how many fields and the time. It doesn't work because all you have to do, as you all can understand, is have one school team say, I'm sorry, we have to cancel today's game because of weather. Now you got the field who can't play because the ground is too soggy. They can't play in the other field because it's a raised mound field because Team A and Team B are already there, so C has to balk. So listen, I'm sorry, but there's no way there's a chart up there that's going to show what I'm talking about because every season and every month is different based on the weather. We can't predict the weather. The weather's going to change, the rain's going to come in, the field could lose a day, could lose 2 days. That screws the whole season up. I'm still playing softball right now with fall ball. We're still playing Wolverines games under the light. We're still there. We're still doing it right now, almost into November. We can't play this Saturday because you guys all know already this rain's coming in. Where am I going to send them? Now we got to go another week. I can't send them somewhere else.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have one other question.
Sure.
You said I think you said, and that's what the question is, that you can't play on a field that does not have a pitcher's mound.
So baseball for boys,
Yeah,
play with a pitcher's mound,
Right.
raised mound.
Okay.
Softball plays from a flat mound.
yeah. Okay, so this proposed field will not have a mound.
It will have a removable mound. As we proposed it in the original phase, it has a removable mound such that it could have a flat softball mound if they wanted to play softball uses, and they could bring out the portable mound to have a raised mound for baseball uses.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Okay,
Or no?
you can, Shana, but I would just ask folks if we could let Brandy finish. Or Shana, can you do it quickly, ask your
Very
question?
quick question. 10 seconds. Is there a reason that we can't use removable mounds on the existing fields? And is there a reason that we can't improve the existing fields that we have in Tivoli? You had mentioned some fields, and I hear you. You need more. You need more field space. I get it.
So Tivoli's field currently in this condition
Let me
can't play.
you gotta let me finish so she can keep going. Is there a reason we can't have these removable mounds for the north field, south field, whichever one at the park doesn't have it?
Don't ask me, I wish the grandpa doesn't know.
And the one, and improve the drainage and improve the quality of the field in Tivoli. Tivoli, last I checked, was still part of Red Hook, part of the town of Red Hook. Maybe their ball field is managed by Tivoli, but perhaps the town could help in that endeavor.
I can answer that one, that could be done.
Let's
All right,
Andy
I'm
answer
done.
that because
Yeah.
we all went around and inspected all the fields. So you're gonna find out about condition, size, and cost associated with upgrading that field.
Actually, we didn't provide costs for upgrading
Okay.
every field because it would be sort of a waste of time to give you like every possible option. I don't know that we could even think of every possible option. So it's really through this dialogue that we find out what is important. We did in the field evaluation look at the condition of each field and make some general comments about where improvements could be made. So that information is at least started, and so it's information that the town board or the recreation committee can start digging into to figure out how they want to prioritize field maintenance or field activities. And to just to Brian's point about the challenges of scheduling fields, we want to stress again, like we did in the outset, that each field has specific dimensions and geometry and features on it, and each sport has a different requirement. So as much as there's a flexibility in the community to play broadly on each field, there are limitations. There are actual physical limitations to different user groups. So you wouldn't want to put the Little League guys on the adult men's baseball field. It would be demoralizing. So they want to match the field to the players, right?
Just to be clear, if we provided a portable mound on one of those softball fields, Brian just told you how
It's already
scheduled they are. If we provided a portable mound,
But the Tivoli fields isn't scheduled.
Tivoli Field isn't scheduled currently, but it's a condition issue there. That's a town decision, yes.
Can I just ask, since we're talking about field scheduling, John, I know like if a certain rec user groups pay a fee, that's one of the reasons the school gets like Brian mentioned, the school schedule is determining sometimes when he has to cancel, and that's partially because they have a contract with us to use the fields at certain times. So does Little League pay a fee also? So,
Yes. Yep.
okay.
Yep. Brandy, you seem to be finished. Okay.
I think we
We
covered.
exhausted you.
Yeah.
Okay, this slide says final report available next week.
Right.
And any questions, and I think we've posed some questions. I just wanted to make sure that folks understood, you talked about how busy our fields are, that we accommodate the schools and so on and so forth. But do you feel you covered the condition of the school fields? Because that was one of the things that was raised, issues about the, fields with the Red Hook Soccer Club, but with the school fields, the wear and tear on it. I think in the previous meeting, you showed the aerials and you showed the wear and tear for the existing. And I want to make sure that folks know that, because they'll see those school fields and think, great, let's just put more on there. But the school is saying the wear and tear is already.
Yeah, we point out in the report that the availability of the school fields is less than some of the other
Want to go to
public
those
fields.
fall and spring charts, we can point it out for you?
Yep.
It's up a little further. Keep going up. So here, you'll see that, I'll step to the side. You'll see that, the rec park fields are scheduled much longer. The reason we are available much longer, so the blue line is what we're looking at. The reason that the rec park fields are available much longer is it takes into account the user group that's playing on the field and the fact that they're baseball fields. So a lot of your heavy wear and tear on a baseball field happens on the clay infield mix, which isn't as subject to breakdown as a natural turf field would be. All the high school fields are multi-purpose rectangular fields, and the user groups are very active high schooler kids, which means they weigh more and they play harder. And when they play harder on the natural turf, it tends to break down faster. And so these fields will tend to wear out in really key areas. Typically on a soccer field, you're gonna see wear and tear at the goal mouth. And on a football field, you're gonna see wear down the center of a football field where the linemen are going up and down the field. And so the school, in an effort to keep grass on their field, has limited the amount of uses that they can have on it. They have worked with some of the community sports in the past. They recognize they have the only football field in town. So they've worked with Pop Warner to get them on a field so that they have a football field to play with. I understand they've worked with the soccer club in the past to provide space. But another key in that is that they don't have outside facilities. So if it's not a school program to open up the facility, it's tough for other user groups to use that facility. So we've kind of shown that availability and talked about that availability in the report, but we've had to bring back the multi-purpose rectangular uses at the high school, and that's why you'll see a difference between those there.
Brandy, would it be possible, as you guys are working on the final draft of this, in the appendix D, that table that shows the different sports that are being played per field? I feel like for the board, it might be helpful to have like a different color ink or something for like, this is a private group, this is a school group, or this is like a town run group, you
You
know?
want our original schedule that had all the colors.
Yeah, well, just like a font, I don't know, I just think,
Something to distinguish.
just to add, not to add more lines or anything, but just to help visualize like sort of what's the use universe that we're dealing, you know what I mean?
If you recall, an earlier version of this table was color-coded based on the user group, and I think we had blocked out groups of time based on that.
Yeah.
It seemed cumbersome to read, and so we were trying to sort of take a different approach here, but we can look at that.
I mean, like I know, you know, like some people will know looking at like Duchess Divas, is that a town-run team, is that a private team, is that a school team, but some people won't, and I think for this just to have longevity and to be helpful, I think that would be helpful, so they can kind of see visually like, oh, this is how much the school makes up of the universe of users, this is how much private groups, this is how much the community, you know what I mean?
One more comment, just please. I'm just curious, the survey results were not shown, and then they were sort of discounted. It was said, oh, 1% is not an effective sample, and really, the standards are, we don't want to really rely on this. Is that because the results for the survey were not in line with the other findings, and that's why it was discounted summarily, or
Well,
is there something that we should know?
Yeah, I thought we were gonna hear about what the survey results were.
We did not build any slides around it because there's very limited takeaway from it. We did get some demographic information about who the respondents were, principally adults 30 to 70. We did get some information around who is using the fields. Are they using them for organized sports or unorganized sports? We certainly have it summarized in Appendix E of the report, but this is still a draft report, and so presenting all those graphics.
Can we make those available?
Yeah, we're just
The
kind of
final
curious,
version will be made
because
available,
We spent a lot of time on other parts of the
Yeah,
report.
absolutely.
It's interesting that it was 30 to 70 because nobody mentioned this evening just the amount of usage. Last night we had a wonderful Rotary Citizen of the Year event. A gentleman who heads the over 40 baseball, 140 strong they are, talking about how we desperately need more fields.
172.
172.
Right.
And so that, last night I had, him talking in one ear and then somebody else talking in my other ear about whether we actually need fields. And so again, this goes to the reason why we chose to do a narrow scope was to address that question, do we need more fields? And so as we look at, say, the Hoffman development and other development coming in, it would be appropriate after a few years to do a very, very broad, before we do a phase 2, broad needs assessment that will take into account all that additional development that's coming in, because that's 100 and some odd homes that's coming in the next few years.
And other uses besides sports fields.
Exactly right. And we did solicit, just like you did solicit in the town survey, ideas like what else do you want to see in your to get more ideas, because, I mean, one thing I wanna tell you, and you know John's very passionate about what he does, and he does a great job, but I don't think you all necessarily know, because you're not here every day, but needs assessment is something that happens daily and weekly with the recreation department, because people have my ear or their ear, but they have his ear all the time, and it's not just the people in the park using the park, but the people outside of it coming to him saying, what about including this, this, and this? And so you'll start to see changes. The reason we're having a new playground is because we are addressing what people are telling us. The reason you're gonna see pickleball, something that many of us didn't even know what it was until, a year or two ago, in our park pretty soon, is because we are constantly trying to address what the needs of the community are with our recreation. But to that end, I promised we would show what the draft of the revised schedule. Are you all familiar with the adopted plan, what that looked like? If you're not, I'd be happy to just explain to you what it looked like, or maybe Ryan, since you're there, you could help me. But this is in essence, what is proposed in phase 1 is simply this parking area here, of which there'll be very little paved parking, only for ADA compliancy. And this will be a multi-purpose field, and it will be used for all types of sports. And then we're going to do rough grading here, so that it'll be essentially some kind of terracing. And so this is to show how fields could fit, but right now we're just talking about, rough grading and seeding. So this leaves this area also open to phase 2 if we decide, no, this is not what we want. But we have to take this material and put it somewhere. We've moved material around this property before, and so have others. We have adjusted this plan based upon the input from previous sessions. There used to be a baseball field here that was very close to the neighbors. We have now removed that from this draft and included a natural meadow area, or I should say a naturally looking meadow area. And there's some small possible activities here, and trailhead. As you may already know, we've received other grants to start trailhead and a connection here on this property to adjoining properties here, 338 acres for hiking, walking, other pathways as part of a very larger village-to-village trail network. And so what you will see as part of phase 1 is essentially this.
Can you just point out where, just so I can orient myself, where Fruitbud Lane is?
Yeah, so I think it's
Right
right
there,
there.
okay, all right, thank you.
Sure. Okay,
What's the acreage of the open space above the parking lot?
above the parking
Yeah.
lot. I wouldn't be able to tell you that, Brian, but I could give you an estimate, maybe tomorrow. There's a neat little feature on Dutchess County's parcel access where you can
Yeah,
actually
okay.
measure things.
Yep.
If I had to guess, what?
Well, the parking area there is about an acre.
Okay.
So if you use that sort of as a block of
And
any,
the meadow is an acre that we've blocked out in the master plan, so roughly
Right.
3 or 4 acres.
Yeah.
And the buffer that used to exist under the adopted plan was something like
50.
50 feet.
50 feet, yeah.
Okay, so
Is
I
that-
think you see that it has changed dramatically. Sorry, Shane.
Is that field still a turf type field, like a
Synthetic.
synthetic, thank you, yeah, synthetic turf type field?
Under this proposal, it's a synthetic turf type field. This area here, again, there'll be terracing here. Nothing is planned for here right now. So it leaves a lot of room for changes in the future, in the near future.
Can I just emphasize too, because we've discussed it previously, but the field dimensions are meant to provide flexibility in scheduling, and also one of the potential benefits of the synthetic turf is that it has longer playability because it is not restricted by weather conditions. So some of the problems that exist with, say, Tivoli's Field that are caused by drainage conditions don't exist on a synthetic field because it is built in with drainage.
So like, what's the cost difference of doing this versus rehabbing the Tivoli Field?
There's a lot more that needs to go into. I've actually looked at Tivoli's Field, and Tivoli, you need to be able to send the water somewhere. You
Okay.
can't just put drainage in and then not have it go anywhere.
So-
And unfortunately,
So it's
Tivoli's
significantly more to rehab Tivoli's Field than to install this?
Tivoli's Field has a larger regional drainage issue that
I was
would
just
need to
asking
be
about
addressed.
cost.
Well, it's part of a bigger drainage issue that would need to be addressed to allow for
Right,
positive
no.
drainage
Yeah,
out of
plus
there.
there's parking issues too. You know, there's no parking.
And until recently, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but until fairly recently, wasn't the village considering scrapping that whole field because it was too expensive for them, or, you know, one of many reasons?
What's the cost of fixing it so that?
You'd have to, I would imagine if anybody has those numbers, it might be the village of Tivoli,
Okay, but you
So-
don't have them,
but we
okay.
don't have.
The
See,
village
there's-
is really, wants to keep it, and it is being used now by the firemen at night or whatever. There are evening games on it. And-
I'll give you an example, the playoffs for the league that plays in the softball men's league, it's the Germantown, old Germantown League that now plays in Dilley. They had to play their playoffs at the rec park. So we hosted them on a Sunday for 3 games because their field was unplayable.
Oh, I'm
right?
not saying that Tivoli
But I
doesn't
want to say
do
one
that.
thing, see, fields require constant maintenance, and the fields at the rec park are groomed every single day, 7 days a week. From the spring right on through, we're still
Right.
grooming them. And Tivoli isn't groomed, so if you're not gonna groom the field and maintain it every single day, you don't have a ball field. I mean, whether you redo it or don't redo it, if you don't have that
Right.
maintenance plan built in with the right equipment and the right people and the budget to support it, you don't have a field in a month. It's gone, it's just destroyed.
The maintenance of the field would have to be addressed.
Yes, you'd have to build that into the process.
Right, but that has to be done with this field as well.
Well, it's a different kind of maintenance on this field.
But it's still maintenance, and you've got a parking lot that needs to be maintained, like, there's maintenance here, there's maintenance there, there's maintenance.
Everything needs maintenance.
Everything needs to be maintained.
Right, it's just a matter of degree, right? So you're looking at a much, much more intensive maintenance program for a turf field than you are a synthetic field.
So I'm going to ask if we can move on to the next item on the agenda. We actually have somebody here who needs to make a very brief presentation. I want to encourage you all to continue to send us comments, thoughts, ideas that you have, and we will take a look at that now that we've solved our email problem there for that week or 10 days.
Do any other board members want to make comments about what we heard tonight? I mean, maybe we
Sure.
should
Do
just
you-
give an option
do-
for that. Do you guys want to say anything or respond to anything?
Anything?
Well, I mean, I want to look at the report that came in. I am, to compare apples to apples, for instance, I just did some quick, so the folks that presented their own survey talked about, you know, number of households versus population, so if you convert the numbers, so the survey done by Ty and Bond is like a 3.8% response rate if you're going by households versus population, so if 6% is statistically important, then it's 3%, 3.8, also statistically important for responses. You know, so that would be something to look at. You know, I was quickly going through the supplemental needs survey that was submitted, and, you know, there's many comments that talk about walking paths or walking trails, running trails, places to walk your dog, which are they're not mutually exclusive. And if you look at the plan that, you know, Robert just showed of the adjusted plan, there's plenty of room for lots of uses on this property. And I just, you know, there's also comments in here, and so one thing I just would like to point out, and I've said this before, so I'll say it again, is that some of the development of this property has to happen no matter what happens to it. If we're gonna make use of this property as a park, whether it has active recreation or passive, we have to have a safe entrance and a parking lot, because Linden Avenue cannot sustain parking along the side of the road. So that aspect of this plan has to go forward. We've tried to look at a way to do the parking lot with as little pavement as possible, so it maintains a, as natural a look, of course with the ADA requirements. So when we're looking at the costs of the project, or the cost of a multi-surface field versus a not, and how much is the overall cost of the program, I just would ask that everyone please remember that there are some basic costs that have to happen with this project, no matter how it's used, right? There has to be an entrance, there has to be parking, it's got to be some sort of restroom facilities. We have short-term plans versus long-term plans. There has to be material, dirt and stuff moved around on the property. We're trying to not pay to cart that off, and then perhaps X number of years down the road, wish we had that, and we didn't, and then buy it again to bring it in. So we are really trying to look at a lot of different uses, a lot of different aspects of the property, and then also don't forget that we do have a grant that will cover the cost of the difference between a turf field and a multi-surface field, if that's the right word for it. Thank you. So I just want to make sure that we're all realizing the totality of what's involved in this project and the decisions that are before the board.
Okay. Anybody else? Bill, did you want to make any comment?
Well, I'll wait till we get the final draft and look at it carefully and look at the survey, that the members of the community have done. But I do know, having lived here my whole life and raising half a dozen children and more nephews and nieces through the system, and being in town government for at least the past 15 years, that what is proposed for the expansion of the rec park has been around for a number of years. It's been thought out by many, many people, both sides of the aisle, as you would say. It's been a matter that the Rec Commission for the town of Red Hook, which has a great reputation for many, many years, has looked forward to. There's definitely, in our 94 needs assessment and in the updated needs assessment, is a no-brainer that there is a need for expansion of our rec facilities. The surveys that have been done show surely that there's a utilization of the existing fields, and again, it's a no-brainer to figure out that we do need more athletic facilities. There's an incidental, extra, I suppose, outside suggestion through the benchmark figures, that for a town like us, we're not being unreasonable, that for our population and our needs, why we could definitely use more facilities. And there's also an interest in having the fields that our future generations are going to be relying upon to be publicly owned rather than privately owned. The man is left from the soccer club, but we've all admired what the Red Hook Soccer Club has done for years, etc. But you just can't rely upon private ownership to run, some of the aspects of our town government. So again, I'll look at these final things, but I think for many of us, we feel that a whole lot of thought has gone into this already. And so I'll make my decision at the appropriate time.
Harry, did you want to say something?
Well, I think I still consider it a work in progress. And I still haven't seen an actual analysis that leads to us having a handicap field. It's not that I wouldn't want to support the handicap, but so far I haven't seen anything that lays that out and puts a number to it. And it's quite expensive. It's really more like $500,000 additional cost.
Sorry, we call them disabled, we don't refer to them that way. It's insulting way to refer to people who are challenged.
Which the what?
The use of the word handicap in the way that, sorry.
Well, all right. I'm using the description it is in the catalog is what it boils down to. And your comment's well taken. And I still see this whole project as a work in progress. And as such, I think there's a lot of things to be looked at yet. I'm not sure I want to look at this to see what actually the numbers of fields that we actually have. It isn't clear to me yet, and I think that I can fathom out of here. I hope. I'll call you if I can. I'll see. We'll see.
And, can I just add one thing to my comments? I'm sorry. As we're all getting like down deep into the details of this project and, looking at all the different surveys and the information. And I do want to just say that I think, this is one of the reasons I think it's so great to live in Red Hook, is that we have people who volunteer, we have people that serve on boards, we have people that are so interested in their community that they come up with a different survey, and they do all of this very detailed research and take the time to come here and present it to us. And I just want to point out that I think that that's really important. I think that's a great part of the fabric of our community. I welcome you all for being here and doing that. And we're just going to try and listen to all that input and make our decision.
Yeah, I would just echo that I really appreciate your time, Pamela and Brian and everybody who worked on this. And, I appreciate your comments about the limitations of the survey the town had produced. I think there were probably limitations to all of these community surveys, and I think yours is a really interesting supplement to ours, and it'd be interesting to see like the overlap on who took them. Like I was speaking to somebody last night who had taken both, and I took both. I'm sure there's many who did, and I think what worries me just generally about all of this is that there's a certain segment of us that is very engaged in this, and there's a lot of people who aren't, and that, like Robert is saying, like that this has been years. And I remember I was sitting in the front row for the public hearing about the first master plan, writing down, because I was a reporter, who attended that public hearing, and it was 3 people, like you said, and Jim Hegstetter was one of them, and I just thought, like, wow, this is a rec expansion project, and 3 people showed up, like, this is crazy, and it bothered me, and it bothers me that I don't think we had as many as we could have had for the community outreach sessions over the summer. Like, I'd like to see this room packed, because there's a ton of people that this affects, and that could benefit from new fields, like Brian said, and who probably have opinions about how that parcel gets used and what we do with all the rest of it, and it's all taxpayer money at the end of the day, right? And it's all like resources we're all gonna use, and so I think that's where my mind is right now, is just like really concerned that I don't think we've expressed well enough what the plan is and what the opportunities are for people to weigh in. I just hope that we, I appreciate you guys coming, I appreciate Brian's comments about the board listening. I just hope that we're communicating that we are still listening, that you feel listened to, and that in the future, when we have projects like this, we can do an even better job of engaging the community as we go along. I think we've made a lot of strides forward with our new website, and hopefully someday we'll be using social media, and those are all ways, hopefully, that we're engaging the community further. I would really like to see us think about, for this project, but even going forward, maybe there's like some kind of community group that we could form to help do that, because I feel like our rec commission, like you guys have enough going on with, like you are doing more of the like day-to-day, there's some visioning, but there's a lot of day-to-day maintenance and decisions that way that happen. And maybe there's an opportunity for some kind of community outreach group that could sort of weigh in on decisions like this and help us get the word out. So I don't know if that's possible, but I'd like to see something like that happen. So yeah, I think that's my comment for right now.
Okay.
I could also add that, in my opinion, that we as a town should subsidize Tivoli in terms of bringing that field up to standards. It's kind of a gimme to do that. And I happen to live in Tivoli, and it's a very small municipality. There's only 1,000 residents there, really only about 200 properties. So it's it could be used as a quality baseball field for the townwide. But it's a matter of adjusting our relationships.
Okay. I just want to respond to the Tivoli thing just very quickly, Harry, because it wasn't mentioned that the Tivoli field is a very small field. And so it would not be able to be a baseball field. It's surrounded by development and buildings. It has very significant challenges. If you've been to that field, everything's falling apart, from the fencing to the backstop to the club, everything is falling apart. But the biggest challenge is, in fact, the drainage, because the drainage cannot be done on the field itself. The drainage has to extend far away from the field. They have drainage issues all around their park. And yes, it's limited by parking as well. And we all know what happens when you have drainage issues, and then you need more impervious surfaces with Tivoli. And I know that we have in the past helped them, and even recently helped them, to try to keep it at least playable. But I can't really say, and I'm only a layman, that it's even safe, that we would allow children to play on that field.
Not in its present condition.
In its present condition.
It could be upgraded to be very playable and kept in that kind of.
Okay, so
Isn't that a discussion for another night, because we do have some other items to get to.
Yeah, and I also think, Harry, that's a nice statement, but of course that requires science and engineering, and so I think, we need to look into that.
We've looked at it in the past, it can be done.
Okay. All right, I just want to say thank you all for coming. Sarah mentioned the limitations of communications. We struggle as a local government to do everything we can to let you know what's going on, to give you the information so that you have the facts of what's going on. And I will say this process has been, for me, like all education, has been really very rewarding. I've invited many folks to call me to ask questions. Those conversations have gone really well. I think when folks understand what's happening to not just these 28 acres, but all of the acreage around there, all of the programs that we have, they find out the limitations of our facilities, that we don't actually. For example, most people thought we owned the Red Hook soccer field properties, okay? So when they find out that we don't, and that, that's not something that is publicly owned and that we can access at our will, they understand then the need, because we essentially have 3 diamonds that the school is using on a priority basis, and then the other organized sports. And I want you to think in terms of just kids or adults that want to use a field. We basically don't have that during those common periods where people go, afternoons and weekends. So we have 3 diamonds and a little grassy area. That's what the town has. So what this needs assessment, and we agree that we wanted to answer the question, does the town really need more fields? We felt confident that it did. I feel more confident after this process that we do need more fields. We looked at all of the fields, and we took in all of the suggestions about how to do, how to create more fields, whether it was up in Tivoli, whether it was to buy even more property north of the current Rec Park East, and I met with those landowners to ask them if they'd be interested in that. We looked at every option that was suggested to us, and any more options that you have, we'd be happy to entertain. So I will just say to you that what we have in front of you is something that obviously in the future it can be amended, but we do have some projects that are now bumping up against some deadlines. And so trails and the creation of this Challenger Field. So we will need to make a decision very soon on how we're going forward, okay? All right, thank you all very much. We're going to move on to the next item in the agenda, and please feel free to reach out to us again, okay? And I hope you feel like you're being heard. All right. We are on to item number 2. Item number one, sorry, yes, we skipped on that.
So moved.
We so moved to go to number 1. Thank you. All right, a resolution authorizing acceptance of SAM grant for tennis court reconstruction. This is just a technicality. We have a resolution. As you know, we didn't get a chance to talk about how we are revitalizing our existing rec park facilities, but please know that we are. We rehab 3 fields, completely rebuilt tennis courts, looking at, well, we're funding a new playground and applying for a grant to get new fencing that is ADA accessible, as well as pathways and restrooms. Right now, we just have a very ministerial act to do, which is to accept a grant from New York State, $50,000 towards the tennis court project. We received the grant nearly 2 years ago, and we're about to get the funding finally. So it's resolution number 68. Thank you, Sue. Accepting state and municipal facilities program grant. And I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. That's $50,000, courtesy of New York State, $50,000, New York State and our Senator Sue Serino. Okay, item number 2, discussion, NYSERDA Clean Energy Grant Program, Town Hall HVAC replacement. Okay, as you know, we had several clean energy grant projects that we put in for. We had $100,000 given to us by New York State with all the work that we had done to become a clean energy community. One of those involved replacing our very old 1980s heating and ventilation equipment. Dennis from the Energy Committee is here. He's got a memo.
Here.
He's got a memo, yes he does.
Some handouts to.
Oh, you have handouts too?
To just.
Okay.
Should be 6 here.
Okay, we can pass it around. Thank you, John.
Hold on for this.
All right. You're not expecting us to understand all this scientific stuff, are you?
Yeah, it's not very scientific.
Okay.
It's actually financial and, there's some subjective things there that.
Okay. So let's talk heating and cooling of Town Hall.
Yeah, so just briefly, we had been awarded a $100,000 grant, of which last year we had proposed several phases of projects to upgrade the town hall building. The first, which was completed this past spring, which included the insulation above the ceiling here to make a tighter envelope and to allow us to be able to use equipment like renewable heating and cooling equipment like ground source heat pump or air source heat pump as a replacement for this vintage air conditioning system that we had. Just anecdotally, you should be aware that although we have 2 air source heat pumps that are currently operational, we only use them for air conditioning in the summer at it's a very expensive proposition. And the reason for that is that there wasn't adequate heating capability, so we were required to use the oil boiler for the main building and an oil furnace for the extension. And thinking about this last year, we originally had envisioned doing a like-for-like replacement, basically putting in air source heat pumps, just using the existing air handlers in this main building, and then replacing the oil furnace for the extension. Having given, over the last year, there are a number of incentives. New York, NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research Development Agency has offered different incentives, including a $1,500 per ton rebate for using ground source heat pumps. The air source heat pumps do not qualify for any incentives. And in that handout, if you look, just basically, I've asked one of the consultants from Aztec Geothermal to give me a comparison between geothermal heat pumps and air source heat pumps. I mean, this is kind of a high-level view. Obviously, it varies from point to point. But the geothermal heat pump, a ground source heat pump, is roughly twice as efficient as an air source heat pump, basically because there's stable temperature in the ground. I won't go into the technical details unless you really want me to. The operating costs and the life expectancy of a ground source heat pump, since all of the equipment is protected in the building, and that is roughly 25 to 30 years. For an air source heat pump, which is subject to the elements outside, it's similar to an air conditioner where it's subject to dust pollution and other things. Its life expectancy is closer to 15 years. Clearly there's no air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps rely on electricity. We really need to eliminate the use of fossil fuels. It also eliminates and provides additional storage capabilities, since we don't have to worry about fuel deliveries and places to store the fuel, as well as the safety issue and concerns associated with combustion. The installation cost is significant, but it's a one-time cost. So what we have to do, and hopefully at the next opportunity after I do some more research, if you agree to put out a proposal for bid for the ground source heat pump, we'll be able to evaluate what the cost would be associated with the installation versus the operating costs and all the other benefits that there would be using a ground source heat pump over an air source heat pump. I think, so what we're proposing now is on behalf of the Energy Committee, I'm asking that the town board approve a request for proposal that would go out for bid to replace the air source heat pumps and primary service using the oil furnace in the extension and the boiler.
We'll have a single heating system for the entire building.
No, it would be three air source three ground source heat pumps.
Yeah,
But it
okay.
would be a single system.
But you're proposing, because we have a separate system in the new wing. That's oil, and we don't want, but that I would want to get away.
We're going to replace that. That would be the proposal.
We want to replace
that one.
We want to replace everything.
Yes.
Okay, and that's your intention.
That's the intention.
And then what about heating water?
Well, it's a good question. So understand that once the wells are drilled and we put in the circulating pumps, the option of adding equipment that would actually be able to do water to water, essentially providing domestic hot water, is really just a function of adding on that loop. I'm sure that there's going to be sufficient capacity. But you're right. So we could actually do hot water as well. But I wouldn't ask that in this initial proposal.
But I would hope you would include it in your effect for your quotes.
Can I just clarify something, Dennis? It's not a request for proposal, it's a bid.
Right.
Okay, so in other words, specs have to be provided
Right.
that can be bid on apples to apples with the bid, okay? Just need to clarify that.
Because it'll be a lot
Which is a
easier to
different-
take care of it,
you know.
and along with the initial bid, than an add-on later on.
So,
That's true.
and then just to clarify, looking at, some of your notes and the little bit I know about geothermal systems. So, initially, we allocated $40,000 of the NYSERDA money towards the like-to-like exchange. So, in a perfect world, if we decide to go out to bid, we could hopefully get it for within that price.
No, let me clarify,
Okay.
because it'll help frame your question. We are doing nearly $300,000 worth of different projects that are going to not only save on emissions, but save on annual costs for the
Right.
town.
I understand that.
Right, 100,000 of that is being granted
Right,
from
and
Clean
40,000
Energy.
of that was allocated for the like-to-like.
The 40,000,
replacement.
exactly,
Yes.
40,000 for air source,
Right,
exactly.
so as I was saying
Yeah.
before you spoke.
Sorry.
there.
Well, I just want to make sure that you're not assuming it's 40,000 coming out of the 100,000, because that 100,000, a little bit was put for each of those projects.
Right, but we had, or I wasn't here then, so the board at that point, on paper anyway, allocated up to $40,000 for the like-to-like exchange for more efficient versions of what we already had.
Right.
So in a perfect world, if we decide to go out to bid on this, we would hope that maybe it would come in at that 40,000 or less.
Not likely.
Okay.
Not likely, but
That's
it
the
may
first
be more
question.
competitive. It may be more competitive than it originally was.
That was a question I had also, Dennis, is like, why do we not have like even a rough estimate of what this might be? Since you've put the 40,000 in your memo, but it doesn't leave us with any idea of what we could be.
Right, and part of it is, until we actually put it out for bid, we're not gonna get a real number. The number that I've been hearing was between 48 and 60,000. So I think that's, now, just understand what we're talking about. That's an initial one-time cost that is proportionally higher than the 40,000 with the air source heat pump. But the operating costs, if you start looking at these numbers, and that's what I'll try to bring next time, is that, it's clear that the savings on operating costs and the other issues, that
Right, so that's
that
what
are
I
being
wanted to,
subject.
that's where I
Yes,
was checking for.
sure.
Which is, so even if it comes in a little higher, it's a one-time cost. And we would then not have to pay the fuel oil costs that we're paying, which I was just wondering if anybody has an
Well,
estimate of what we
We
pay
do, well, that's
now
what he's
for-
gonna give
Well,
us,
that's
is an
what I'll
analysis of
get.
what our savings would be.
But let
Well,
me
but we must
actually.
know what our bill is for heating oil.
We do.
Okay,
We
so.
do, we benchmark that.
We had that, and I have it somewhere
Yeah.
buried in one of my files, but clearly, this moves us in a different direction than we've ever been. We know that we have to replace the equipment that's there because of its age, right? It's already, past its, its life limit, and we've had.
Past its age 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, I don't know if I have to do anything more to convince you. I mean,
I
it's
just
clear.
have one other quick question in terms
Sure.
of where the equipment would go, because we're sort of tight for space here, so you said it would be inside the building, so have we identified a space where this could go?
Well, depending upon the equipment that's proposed, it can be stored downstairs in the basement. There'll be piping that'll come in from the wells. You understand what's being involved, right? So there'll be wells that'll be drilled. There'll be piping and excavation to the building.
So maybe it could fit where the oil tank and the furnace is now. I'm just trying, we're so tight for space here, I'm just trying to make sure
Yeah,
that
so-
we're not gonna lose the whole office.
Right, so I think, I'm going to say that typically what they would do is the whole unit, the compressor and air handler is self-contained. And we would replace these air handlers. I mean, we're really not talking about a major difference in terms of footprint that's required. For the vertical unit that's in the extension, it's pretty much the same thing. It'll be a vertical unit that'll have incorporated in a heat pump and so on. So the only thing that's really different is that we're gonna be circulating water from these wells as the medium of exchange of heat, you know, for the ground loop, with the ground loop. So it's not an issue. There's no air chillers in that from the.
So before,
Yeah, so can I ask a question? You have it on.
I'm having a hard time getting it worded
Go ahead.
tonight, look at that. I just wanna say before our engineer finishes reviewing and our attorney reviews it, you just wanna get a general idea, like, are we interested in finding out what the number is, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
And
I
I'm
don't know.
interested in finding out, because it lowers our emissions and our costs
Okay.
possibly, so, yeah,
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, just in the future for your memo, you can just say in the first sentence, like, here's what I wanna know. I just wanna know, like,
Right.
should we even go for this or not, you know, cause there's a lot of lead in here, and I think, yeah, I was a little confused also, like, is this the actual bid document, but it's not.
It's not, it's a
Okay.
first draft,
So you're gonna be coming back to us with
more stuff.
more that includes what, like a cost benefit
You
analysis?
said you were coming back with cost
Yeah, I
benefit.
think so.
Forced air versus.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'd like to see.
Well-
I'm interested in the possibilities too, but for sure before we voted on something where we had already budgeted 40,000, I think we need to see a better number as far as what we might be getting into. If you're gonna do a bid proposal, then you're gonna have some firm giving you specs for that, right? Which means somebody's gotta be doing an assessment that could help us understand what the number
That's our
range
engine.
might be, right?
Our engineers are gonna give us some.
We're
I'm
looking
not
at
a
the design.
mechanical engineer, but I did have a conversation and Ted asked me to take a look at the
I mean,
Or
isn't
should
it often the
document.
case when you have a project like this that you actually get like a professional firm to help you construct the bid and then they don't get to bid on it? I thought that was normally.
No, we don't preclude any firm who comes in here and advises. That's the whole point of public bidding is that you take the lowest responsible bidder.
Well,
And it's
sometimes
all
happens,
sealed.
In this
But-
case-
Wait a second, please. The question was asked, I wanna answer it. We've had firms come in here, and so they've looked and they've assessed our property for this installation to see if it could be done and given us rough estimates. So we've already had that. That's why you're
Yeah, so
here.
that
So we've had a
could be
couple of
included.
firms. So if you wanna use a couple of estimates,
So-
and we can take a look at a
So
cost benefit sheet.
the estimate before there were any new incentives from NYSERDA was roughly $100,000.
I mean, have you ever
The-
seen
the-
the cost benefits that the water board gives us when they wanna like repaint the water tank? So that's what I'm talking about, is like,
Yes.
what we really should see is like, sure, it's gonna be $100,000, but then you're gonna show us like all the benefits, right? That's gonna be like, so it's 100,000 where we were expecting 40,000, but then look at the payoff over 10 years or 20 years or
Right.
whatever. Like, we wanna see all that stuff, right, before we approve this.
Part of the problem is it has to be designed. The whole system has to be designed.
Which is
Scratch.
one of the difficulties, because there are many different possible alternatives. And that's one of the reasons while I specified what I thought, the best practices for sizing, heat load calculations that I expect and so on, that's why I'm not, I don't know, maybe technically it's not quite an RFP, but in my mind, it would be a request for proposal that they understand the target, and the target is that we want to replace this with ground source heat pumps. These are the constraints that they have. They have to be able to provide remote monitoring. These are things that I'm kind of like seeding into the request for proposal, knowing that it's going to benefit us in the long run. If somebody says, I can't do that for less than $100,000, and the next person comes and says, I can do it for 60, at least we're covered in terms of what the requirements are. So whether it's called an RFP or whether it's a bid, I don't really care. The problem remains the same. Until we actually put it out, saying these are the requirements, and that we're not going to get any numbers back that we
But
can
you could give us a
talk about.
comparison, you making a couple of assumptions, if we were to get a bid around X amount of dollars, the project to be completed, geothermal, you've given us the sheet here that says you would save half as much on this or this. If you could just do the numbers for us, then I think it would make.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay?
and pick a number that's like a high-ish number, so we're not like, sticker shock, like,
Maybe
make
a
us feel
few numbers,
confident.
yeah.
If you're confident,
Okay.
then help us feel confident.
Now, as I see it, you're not gonna get a firm number until we have a firm design.
And we're not gonna get a firm design unless we wanna do the design, and I'm not prepared to do that.
I don't know that we need to do the
you know,
design. This is
right.
not
I mean,
rocket
that's
science.
kind of what my expectation is of whoever's proposing.
I know, but they're not gonna tell you what it's gonna cost unless you have a design.
Our attorney looks a little concerned, so I just.
Well,
wondering what
when you say you're not gonna do design, you have to do a specification that's sufficient to be able to award a bid on a least cost basis.
Yes,
Right, with apples to apples comparison.
that's right.
And you may include alternatives, so you may ask people to bid on a base bid with an alternative XYZ, things that you would like but are not absolutely required. And then you can make an assessment of, what's the least cost for the base and what you can afford.
I mean,
Okay.
Ted should be able to help you structure that.
Well, I think
Yeah.
Brandy was asked to assist with that
Yeah.
by Ted.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it seems like our consensus is, yes, we like this idea, we want more information, right?
Yes.
So that's all we have to do
I
tonight?
think. Is that fair?
Okay?
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you, Dennis.
you have my blessing or what?
Thanks, no.
Provisional blessing for the week until we
I
see
figured
more.
it would be.
Thank you, Brandy, thank you, Chris. Okay, we're moving right along to the next item, which is reorg. We just have to appoint a few folks to our disaster preparedness committee. Do we have a reorg thing in here?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Okay.
I have one, you can't see it though.
Do you know what I'm gonna say about this list?
No. So, disaster preparedness, but we won't talk about that in a second. All right. Disaster preparedness, they are meeting again, and we very much appreciate that. We just need to update a couple of the representatives from the community that are on the committee that have been meeting. We have the chair, which is Hai Ping. We have the at-large community member, that's Hai Ping. Richard Franklin is still on the committee and wishes to remain. At-large community member number 3. We could put Randy Klum in that spot. At-large community member number 4, Eleanor Troy is attending meetings and still involved. Obviously, Teresa Burke, it's essential that she be part of the disaster preparedness committee. And so, terms of 2018 for those who were listed as 2016 here. Perry Sheldon has been attending. Bard College, John Gomez. Red Hook Fire Company, Rich Hilbrand has been attending. Tivoli Fire, Tom Chrissy was not able to be at yesterday's meeting but is attending. Patrick Hildebrand for the police representative. These are all 2018 terms. And Joseph Stevens was also there yesterday. It was a good meeting with the Red Cross and Bill Beal from County Emergency yesterday afternoon. So I would like to move that we appoint those individuals for a 2-year appointment ending in 2018, and then we can just re-up it at the end of the year.
Ending in
2018.
Do we still want the Red Hook Ministerium
It's only a
on
month.
there? Cause it's been
It's
vacant for a
vacant.
long time,
Well, I didn't.
looks like.
This is 2018.
I'm just wondering, like,
It
is
is.
that?
That's the term.
I think you created this with a local law, but I couldn't tell you,
Yeah,
Sarah,
I
without
think
going back and
there's a
looking.
representative
I mean, we should look for one, is all I'm saying, it's
Yeah.
been vacant a long time.
there. Yeah. So no, 2018 is the end of the term, and then we can just re-up them in January. Okay?
So my only comment, I'm glad that Eleanor is sticking with it, and I know Hai Ping is chairing. the list that we were given here only included one woman, and that was my only concern, is that I'd like to make sure that we're just aware of that when we're recruiting
Okay.
people. So just a request that if we are looking out for the Red Hook Ministerium, maybe we could do double effort to see if we could get some more gender people.
I don't wanna test your math, but Hai Ping and Teresa Burke count as 2 women.
Yeah, and Eleanor Troy, so I'm saying that's good.
3 women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. On this
Okay.
list, there's only one woman. That's why I'm saying the list concerned me. But Hai Ping is the chair, so that's
Okay.
great, and Eleanor Troy is re-upping, so
Is
that's
re-upping,
good.
yeah.
So
Well, I
that's
thought
good,
we
it makes
had
me
a
feel a little
2-page
better,
We
but.
had we have a 2-page
Oh, yeah, I
list.
see, okay.
You didn't look at that, that's okay, no worries. But yes, it should be representative of the community, okay. Very good, was there a second to that motion?
No, not yet.
Could there be?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ministerium.
What about the Energy Committee? We've got 3 vacancies.
Let's
Working on that, isn't
see.
There's Dennis, Lori, and
Dan Smith is supposed to be on that. I thought we had appointed him.
Who?
Dan Smith. He was on the Energy Committee back in 2009 when it was first created.
Maybe rolled off.
does he know about it?
He does, he's been involved, in fact, he is doing, they'll be back, by the way, in the next couple of meetings with updates on all your streetlights and whatever, and Dan is doing his point man for streetlights.
So I move we put Dan back on the committee.
Okay, 2019, oh no, one year appointment, sorry. Term ending in 2018.
So Bill, you're gonna move?
Yeah.
Moved, I'll second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so 2 vacancies
What
there.
about Gail Nussbaum, is there a reason we never reappointed her, or did we? On the ethics board?
Nope, you did not. Because
Interesting.
I think somebody was always going to check with her,
Oh,
you know?
and then.
Never
It
happened.
just gets dropped.
Well, I talked to her at a thing the other day, and she was talking
I
about
thought
being
you
on the
said
ethics board. She
Yeah,
was
no,
thinking
I
about
don't
how
We
to
think-
be
didn't
on it.
reappoint her.
I didn't officially ask her, I just assumed she was on it, I don't know.
Alright, well, if she doesn't want to, she could always resign, but it's a term ending in 2022, and I would so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you all very much.
And
Okay,
then planning board, we still have a vacancy plus, do we have no alternates? Or Charlie Lang is an alternate, so we have 1 alternate position, is that right?
that is correct.
Yep.
Alright, St. Margaret's Committee, we're talking about maybe trying to get some ideas going on St. Margaret's, more on that at the next meeting, hopefully. That's all I have for reorg, unless somebody else has anything.
Oh, just on the LWRP.
Yes, ma'am.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think we have all the members listed here except for myself, so am I supposed to be in the liaison or am I supposed to be a member?
You could be whatever you want. Typically, we do liaison, but there are some committees where you could be a member too.
Well, what does it matter for the grant reporting?
No.
Okay.
So shall we make you a liaison?
No, make me a member because we're all doing a lot of work.
Okay. Fine.
Are you moving that, Robert?
LWRP.
Oh,
I'd be happy to move that
Yeah.
Christine Kane to be a member with a 2-year term ending in 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, John.
So in the interest of time, I'm wondering if we could do the planning board report.
You want me to start?
Christine?
Okay, so this is the report for August, September, and October. They have had public hearings and granted approvals to 2 lot line alterations, 1 certificate of appropriateness, 2 minor site plans, and 1 amended, I believe. And then they have a special permit site plan combination project that they approved. And then for ongoing or beginning reviews, they have a special permit and another special permit site plan combination project.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to departments. You want to do assessors while you're at it? What do you got, Bill?
Go ahead.
What do you got?
This is a report for September and October. 11 sales in the town of Red Hook up through 10/24. 9 single-family parcel sales and 2 vacant land sales. Lowest was $60,000 for a vacant parcel, highest was $372,000 for a single-family residence in the town. School tax bills are mailed out, and the assessor did get some questions about that. Our assessor attended a meeting on October 3rd in the village of Tivoli with, I'm assuming the real property tax director she mentions from Columbia County. And they spoke with a resident that came, and they had about 50 plus seniors there. And they have had questions regarding the new process for the enhanced star exemption for 2019. And this year, all enhanced star renewals will be completing an additional form that will be submitted to New York State Tax and Finance, and this will be then entered on the New York State website. There's been multiple new construction of single-family homes being built in the town and villages that will appear on the 2019 tax roll. That's that.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Building and zoning, Harry, do you want to give us the quick summary sheet there?
Yep. There are 56 permits, 45 inspections, 27 COs, that's projects completed, 4 complaints, I'm not sure what each of them were, and the revenue of $16,500.
Okay, and that's almost a 2-month report there.
Yeah.
Both September and October. Yeah. Okay. Disaster preparedness, I think I mentioned there was a meeting well, this is the September minutes of a meeting. They also had one yesterday with the Red Cross and Bill Beal from Emergency Management. But what we have in front of us is discussing inventory, and so they went through the list: Red Hook High School, BARD, Highway Department, Red Cross, and also with our plan, what are the actions that take place. That's what I have for disaster preparedness. Bill, you have your task force?
Yeah, the task force has been meeting the past couple of months weekly and discussing short-term rentals for the town of Red Hook and prospective regulation of Airbnbs in the town of Red Hook.
Okay. Sarah, could you please give us a very brief summary of this multi-page Recreation Commission report?
Sure. Tennis court rules have been updated, so please take a look at them. Sometimes people are bringing pets onto the tennis courts, and we just want to remind people that claws and other things that pets bring along can damage the court surface, and it'd be great if we could keep that to tennis-only activities. Bounce boards, I know a lot of people have been asking about that for the tennis courts, may be installed in the spring. We're gonna look into it. And what else? So it looks like, playground committee is kind of finishing up their fundraising hopefully in 2018. I think they're about 80% of their goal and feeling positive about that. And are starting to work with the playground manufacturer people to talk about ordering and how it's going to go, and they're going to sit down with John and Doug soon to talk about how the install will go, so that's exciting. Look for that first thing in the spring. And other than that, there's just like a lot of maintenance going on, a lot of taking care of the snack bar area, a lot of like reviewing everything that happened over the summer, trying to like get all the data buttoned up. A new grant applied for flag football's going on. Just kind of reading through really quickly. There was that new grant that I think Robert mentioned with Winnicke Land Trust for the trailheads over at Red Hook West, so that's exciting. And then they've been discussing a lot about pickleball. And it looks like one of the suggestions is to actually take the roller hockey rink and make it into a pickleball court. It's the first time reading of this, so I'm just like scanning through really quick, but
That's
so that's an
four
interesting,
courts.
4 courts.
Four
So that's an
courts.
interesting possibility. I don't know if people who use the roller rink for other things have anything to say about that, but there's been some inappropriate graffiti, so we just ask people to please watch out over there and report situations that you see. We're trying to stay on top of that, and I think that's it.
Great, thank you. Christine, could you report on the Senior Services Committee, please?
Okay,
Just-
so
just
this is the September and October reports. They had 2 meetings to plan their weatherization sign-up event. And they had a presentation from Dutchess County Community Action Partnership Weatherization Assistance Program about this project. They're sponsoring an event. Actually, I thought that might have happened, but it doesn't have the date in here, so I could be wrong about
No, it's
that.
October 30th.
Oh, okay, great, okay, October 30th. And they have reached out to the 6 towns of Northeast Pine Plain, Stanford, Milan, Red Hook, and Rhinebeck, and the villages of Millerton, Rhinebeck, Red Hook, and Tivoli about the event, and they're hoping for a good turnout.
Thank you very much. Sarah, to report on tree preservation.
Okay, looks like a large stump cluster on Pitcher Lane was removed, and they've been updating their webpage, and they've finalized the details for their fall tree planting, which will be in early November. And they're going to seek bids to drop a large diseased maple on the north side of Pitcher Lane, so that area of town's getting a lot of attention right now. They're always active.
Great. Thank you very much. Well,
Seniors?
Seniors? We did it.
I just did senior.
Oh, you did it.
Christine
Sorry.
did that.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was looking at the other one.
Okay.
Can
we
I
use
ask
the
one
cemetery?
thing, going back to
Red Church Cemetery?
on the disaster preparedness committee, I noticed that High Ping has Stephen Peroga, I might be saying his name incorrectly, as a member, and he's also from Bar. Should we put him as an alternate to John Gomez?
Sounds
or-
good. Sure.
Yeah.
Let's put him as an alternate, yeah, because I don't think we had more than one Bard slot there.
Right. So that's okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Why don't we do Red Church Cemetery? I'm sorry, I didn't see that in my packet, Bill.
The Red Church Cemetery Committee, which was created by the town board to begin the operation and maintenance of the Red Church Cemetery, which was transferred, as everybody knows, to the town of Red Hook after being in private ownership all these generations. The committee met in September and October and finalized the versions of the rules and regulations to be applied. They're on the record here with the town clerk. The price list for graves, the cemetery plot deed was created with the town of Red Hook, has the logo, of course, on it. And there was a town board resolution that adopted local cemetery law that creates all of the detail of the acceptance by the town of Red Hook of the cemetery. And so the committee meets every month and is working very diligently to maintain the maps and update them, and to review the fairly expensive cost of maintaining the cemetery, which is a continuing effort and for which we hope we get some reimbursement from funds that were transferred when the cemetery was transferred.
Very good. Okay, I believe that's all our board and committee reports. If there is no other business this evening, I would like to thank you all for joining us. I'm sorry it's a long meeting tonight, but we appreciate your sticking with us. And good night. I would
So
make a
moved.
motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Executive session.
Thank you, Steve.
No, right?